thank you all for joining us today. We're really happy to be here to talk to you all about applying for summer studentships. I am joined by two colleagues here, so we'll just do a quick round of introductions. I am Dr. Kyla Flanagan. I'm the academic lead for the College of Discovery, Creativity, and Innovation, and that college is all focused about engaging students in undergraduate research. So I'm really excited to be here today talking to you about how to get involved in summer research and summer studentships. And I have with me here Jennifer Logan.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Logan. I'm the program coordinator for the Bachelor of Health Sciences program in the Cummings School of Medicine.
Thanks, Jennifer. And Joanne Fung.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joanne. I am the program coordinator at the College of Discovery, Creativity, and Innovation.
Wonderful, thank you. So as we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. So just to make note, the session is being recorded. The recording will be shared afterwards. Joanne will follow up with an email to all of you with the recording and all the information that we provide in this info session. So don't worry about taking notes. Everything will be followed up with you afterwards. You can focus on the conversation here today. We'll ask that you keep your microphones turned off so we can keep the audio quality good for the recording, and use the chat to ask questions. So feel free to pop questions into the chat. We'll save all the questions to be addressed at the end of the presentation after we've gone through all the information here today. So we have several goals for you for this session. We hope that you get direction and instruction on how to begin developing a proposal for summer research in collaboration with a research supervisor. We'll have time to explore what makes a strong proposal and a strong application, and clarify the process for how to go through the system, the process, the timelines, what everything will look like when you enter into apply for a summer research position. And we'll also have a chance to think and look at how applications are evaluated, the rubrics that adjudicators will be using to evaluate the research proposal that you submit. So as we get started, I just want to take a moment to talk a little bit about what summer studentships are. So summer studentships provide funding to support students conducting research between May and August in collaboration with a faculty member. That funding goes directly to support you, the student. It's not used for research costs or split or shared with your supervisor. These are funds intended to support you as you work on research over the summer. The funding is awarded through a competitive application process based on your proposed research. So the proposal that you pull together is what we use to evaluate and determine who receives funding in this competitive process. There's a really important website I'd like to make sure all of you are aware of, and that's research.ucalgary.ca/students. On that web page, there's tons of important information about summer studentships, and you'll also see many of the different programs that provide studentships, including many of the ones that we'll talk about here today. Okay, so that's what we're going to be focusing on for today's information session, summer studentships, and going about the application process. So as I've alluded to here so far, these are awards that you apply for in partnership with a UCalgary academic staff member. So unlike other awards where you might just apply as an individual and submit an application for an award or a scholarship, these awards require that you have a supervisor who's willing to support your application. So it's really important that as you're thinking about this summer studentship opportunity, you are working with a supervisor that's an academic staff member who's supporting this process. So you will collaboratively be working with a supervisor to produce a proposal and having ongoing communication with your supervisor as you develop and think about the research you want to conduct. So communicating with your supervisor about timelines, expectations, how the application for the proposal works is really important. And having that communication with your supervisor as you go through this process is really essential. So this is a key component that's a bit unique to summer studentships, in that you need to have a supervisor. So if we think about the process, the overall steps that we need to go through to apply for summer research, summer studentships, we've tried to break it down into these 4 steps. The first step being finding a research supervisor. Once you have that research supervisor, then you and the supervisor work together to collaboratively write the proposal. You as a student would then submit your application, and following your submission of your application, the supervisor submits a portion as well. So we today are really focusing on these 2 steps in the process: writing the proposal, working with your supervisor to write the proposal, and actually how you would go about submitting the proposal. If you are still at this step, at the step of finding a supervisor, that is okay. There is still time for you to make your way through this process, but you are going to want to find a supervisor quite quickly here. If you're not sure where to start or how to go about this process, we had an information session in November that really outlined steps that you could take to try and find a supervisor. So the link is here. Joanne has just popped the link in the chat as well. So if you are at this stage, go back and look at that recording and start the process from scratch here. If you already have a supervisor, great. We're going to be focusing on the next steps here: writing the proposal and submitting your application to the CAS portal. So if you're in the stage where you're looking for a supervisor, you'll need to be aware of who can be a supervisor on campus. So there are a number of different job titles for people that are eligible to supervise students in summer studentships, but supervisors must be full-time UCalgary academic staff members, and they can only support 2 students. So we're talking about full-time academic staff, people with titles assistant, associate, full professors, instructors, senior instructors, teaching professors, those with clinical faculty appointments, librarians, archivists, curators, and professor emeritus who have an active UCID. So all of those folks would be eligible to supervise you in a summer research studentship. There are other people on campus who may be eligible for co-supervision. So if the person you are hoping to work with is not a full-time academic staff member, they can co-supervise you, but you will also require a full-time academic staff member to be listed as the primary reference on your application. So those folks include sessional or affiliated instructors, postdoctoral fellows, guest postdoctoral scholars, adjuncts, postdoctoral associates, etc. So if you're hoping to work with some folks that have these job categories, you will also need to find a co-supervisor to work with. Okay, so just a little bit about who can supervise if you're at that stage and you're still looking for a supervisor. But once you found a supervisor, this is where we're going to hone in today. Once you found a supervisor, you can start developing your research proposal. And this is what your application is based upon. We have some suggestions, some guidance here for how to get started. Good practice as you start research is to read a lot about your project topic, asking your supervisor if there's any good resources or readings that you should be looking at as you're starting to prepare and think about your proposal. Remembering that research is really a process. You need to have the whole thing planned out right away. But you can be flexible, be creative as you think about how this research can evolve and how you want to sort of begin developing your proposal. So do as much reading as you can, be as creative as possible, think flexibly about what this project could look like, and start developing that research proposal. When we think about proposing the research and applying for awards, we have a system that helps streamline this whole process for both students and for us in terms of allocating awards across campus. So when you submit an application and apply for a summer studentship, you complete one application form, but you're looked at and considered for many different awards. And all of this process happens through what is known and loved, the Consolidated Application System. So the CAS, or Consolidated Application System, is where we intake summer studentship applications and then look at them for a whole series of awards. Okay, so I'm going to pass things over to Joanne, who's going to tell you a lot more about the CAS.
Awesome, thanks, Kyla. So I am going to quickly share my screen here. All right, so yes, I'm going to be talking specifically about the Consolidated Application System. How does it work and how do you submit your application through it? So like Kyla just mentioned, the Consolidated Application System is a single system for many summer studentships, including the ones that are listed on this slide here. When students submit an application, they only submit one single application per academic year, and students are automatically considered for the awards for which they are eligible for. So the system automatically determines a student's eligibility based on the answers within your application and based on your answers in your proposal. What this means is some students might be eligible for more than one award. So say you submit an application, you might be eligible for Alberta Innovates, and you might also be eligible for O'Brien Centre Summer Studentships as well. However, the Consolidated Application System is intended to streamline processes. So successful applications are only offered one award per academic year. So if, say, you are eligible for both Alberta Innovates and OCSS, and you are a successful, strong applicant, then you will only be offered either Alberta Innovates or OCSS. You won't be offered both awards, even if you are eligible for both. That is how the Consolidated Application System will work. In terms of just some more information about the awards, all the awards within the system should be 8, 12, or 16-week terms from May 1st, 2022 to August 26, 2022. We have to follow the U Calgary academic calendar. So the end of the summer term is August 26, and that's the last day that your summer studentship can end on. Awards offered through the system are considered scholarship/awards, and they are not taxed. However, if you have any questions about that, please contact the Student Financial Office. And in addition, the award values. So they have increased from previous years, in case you were wondering. 16-week terms are now $7,500. 12-week terms are $5,625, and 8-week terms are $3,750. And for most of the awards, they should be paid out monthly through direct deposit to the student. In terms of eligibility, like I mentioned before, the application system assesses eligibility as you complete it. For the majority of the awards in the consolidated system, you have to be a full-time undergraduate University of Calgary student continuing in the fall semester. And what that means is you aren't graduating this upcoming winter semester, you aren't finishing up your courses at the end of April, and you aren't convocating in June. You are continuing your studies and you are enrolling in classes in the fall 2022 semester, continuing on with your current degree. You must also, for the majority of awards, have a minimum 3.2 cumulative GPA, rounded to the nearest tenth of a decimal. And a cumulative GPA includes all courses that you've taken since starting your program. If you have any questions about how to calculate your GPA or which courses are included in your GPA, you can always talk to a faculty advisor who can provide some information and can help you calculate your cumulative GPA. For external applicants, so students who aren't from the University of Calgary and are, say, perhaps from UBC or University of Alberta, so external institutions, they might be eligible for certain awards in the system. And same for graduating students. So students who are graduating this upcoming year and convocating in June, you might be eligible for certain awards. For external applicants and graduating students, I always encourage them to check out Alberta Innovates. Alberta Innovates, I believe, offers awards for students who are external applicants and graduating this year. Okay, so just a really quick walkthrough of what you can expect in terms of the timeline. So first things first is the student applicant deadline, which obviously is very important for many of you here today. The deadline is February 4th, 2022 at 4 p.m. And I cannot emphasize enough how important that 4 p.m. deadline is. The system is really strict. If you submit after 4 p.m., you won't be able to submit your application. You must meet that February 4th, 4 p.m. deadline. After you submit your portion of the application, we give supervisors around 1 week to submit their portion. So their deadline is February 11th at 4 p.m. to complete their portion of the application. After the supervisor submits, adjudication begins, after which hopefully successful applicants will be notified by email 6 to 8 weeks after the application deadline. So for students who've applied, they can likely expect to hear back between late March to early April. And finally, once that process has been completed, successful applicants will start their research terms between May to August. Okay, so here's where I really start talking about the system itself, and I'll be sharing some screenshots with everyone here today so you can get a sense of what the application system looks like. But before you get started, I just want to make some notes of things that you should probably be aware about and kind of check off on your mental checklist before you get started. So first things first, we always encourage students to log into the system early and review the Consolidated Application System as soon as possible. That way you can take a look through the system and get a sense of what kinds of questions you're going to be asked and what kinds of answers you should be submitting. We also encourage students to review the adjudication rubric ahead of time. We will be covering that later on in the presentation, and carefully reading through all instructions. For external applicants, they will be required to request a UCID and register for an IT account. Exact steps on how to do those are available at the link in this slide. And external applicants will also be required to upload official transcripts from their home institution. All right, so in terms of what you can expect to see for most students, or all students who will be going through the system, you will be asked to submit the following information. So this is why we encourage students to check in early, because then you can see how the questions are asked and what kinds of questions you will be asked. So for everyone, this will include a title of your proposed project, an overview/abstract of your proposed project, the originality and creative aspects of your research, the potential benefit this project will provide to you, and any relevant experience that you might have that will help you succeed with the proposed research project. And please note that there are maximum character limits for each of these sections. The character limits do include spaces and punctuation, so please be aware of that. All right, so in terms of the actual steps of how to apply, so first things first, access the consolidated system, which is available at the link on the slide and also available on various award websites. You will log in with your UCalgary IT username and password, and that's the same username and password that you would use for your D2L account. And then you will be sent to a front page where there's a bunch of information. Please ensure that you read through all of it carefully. And then when you scroll down, you'll see a section where you can click Start New Application, and then you can start your application. The application form will first send you to a page where we will ask you to complete demographic questions. So these are questions like asking sex, gender, Indigenous identity, etc. Please note that this data collected is intended to help us measure our progress in building an inclusive awards program. Neither supervisors nor adjudicators will have access to these questions. When you submit, your supervisor and the adjudicators of your application will not be able to see your answers to these EDI questions. Okay, so once you fill out the EDI portion of the application form, you will be sent to another form, and from here on out, your supervisor and adjudicators will be able to see most of the information. So you will want to be aware about that. So of course, fill out the application form carefully. You'll see that you will need to input your GPA, your status as a student, and some answers to various questions. Something that I really want to make note of to everyone here today is that when you are entering in your supervisor's name, so you'll see that little box there under supervisor's name, you want to ensure you enter your supervisor's correct UCalgary email address, or if you are searching for your supervisor in the UCalgary address book, which is that little book icon beside the box there, that you are selecting the proper supervisor. Every single year we have issues where a student has accidentally selected someone who has the exact same name as their supervisor and who also works at the university. So please be sure that you are selecting the correct supervisor. Other things to make a note of are that depending on which awards you might be eligible for, depending on your answers to various questions, you might be required to answer additional questions. So if, for example, I selected yes to, is this a health-related research project, more questions would be popping up on this page here that I would be required to answer. So that's why we encourage students to go through the application system early so they can get a sense of potentially additional questions that they might have to answer. And finally, if you're an external non-UCalgary student, you will need to upload your transcript on this form. All right, here is a series of screenshots of what you can expect to see in the application system. So you will be required to upload your, to input your UCID, your preferred email, faculty, program of study, year in program, mailing address, and other funding that you might have applied for in the current year. You will be asked to select which period of award you are seeking. So whether you are seeking a 16-week, a 12-week, or an 8-week research term. You'll be asked to include the title of your research project, as well as the overview / abstract, which are things that I had shown you in a previous slide. So you'll see originality, creativity, and significance, potential benefits, and finally relevant experience. So these are all the questions that all students will need to answer. But there might be, again, like I mentioned, additional questions that you might have to answer. All right, and a tip that we have for students is please ensure that when you are drafting up your answers for this proposal and for this application, that you do so in a separate application. So just use a Word document or something else and don't type up your answers within the system. We don't want students to lose their work. We don't want the system to crash down while you are in the middle of typing out your amazing sentences. Please make sure that you are keeping it somewhere else and refining it somewhere else, and then inputting it into the system once you are ready. Okay, so when you have gone through everything and you are 100% sure you are ready to submit, you are at the final stage of submitting. But first things first, if you want to save your application and return to it at a later date, you can definitely do so. You'll see that there's a save button at the very end of the application form. However, when you are ready to submit, you will see that there are these 3 student acknowledgements at the bottom of the page. In order to submit your application, you will need to select yes to all of these acknowledgements under the student's acknowledgement, notice, and submit student application. After you've selected yes to all 3, the save button will turn into a submit button. And once that button turns into a submit button and you click submit, you cannot edit your application after submitting. So please ensure that your application is exactly how you want it to be before you submit. All right, so you submitted, awesome. Once the application is submitted, your supervisor will receive an automatic email notification to enter into the system and start completing their portion of the application. Please note that supervisors cannot even start or enter into the system for their portion of the application until after you've submitted yours. This is why we really encourage students to communicate with their supervisors and be really clear in their expectations, because if a student submits February 4th, which is the student deadline, and the supervisor only has 1 week to submit their portion, the supervisor might not have enough time to complete their portion. They might need more than a week. So communicate with your supervisor. Your supervisor might ask you to submit prior to the February 4th student deadline. So be sure that you communicate with them. The automatic email notification that's sent out to your supervisor after you submit will be sent to your supervisor's UCalgary email address. There are a lot of supervisors who use different email addresses, like a Gmail account or an Alberta Health Services account. So please connect with your supervisor, make sure they know once you've submitted, and to ask them to check their UCalgary account if they don't regularly check their UCalgary account. If your supervisor has questions about what's required for their portion of the application, and if they want to potentially get a sense of what they're expected to submit before you submit your portion, they can find some more information on that on the webpage that's listed on the slide here. All right, so some troubleshooting things that are common for many students each year. If you have a login problem, so if you're unable to log into the system, make sure that you confirm your UCalgary IT username is correct. And if you are a non-UCalgary student, make sure your IT account is registered. If you're still unable to log into the system, we ask students to contact UCalgary IT services. The system is integrated with UCalgary IT. So any concerns surrounding IT account activation, usernames, or registration, you will want to contact UCalgary IT about, whether that's through creating a ticket or calling UCalgary IT. Other things to be aware about is make sure that you have accepted all acknowledgements, uploaded required documents if needed, filled out all required fields, and used correct browsers, which I will talk about in the next slide here. But all of those things are really important to ensure that you have a complete application. So compatible browsers, this is important for students who want to go into the system and submit for everyone. It is important to make sure that if you are a Mac user, use Safari, and if you are a Windows user, use Internet Explorer. I cannot stress this enough, because if you don't use these browsers, you may run into issues with formatting your application or with even potentially submitting your application. So please ensure you're using a compatible browser to get a really great experience when submitting your application. All right, so that was a lot about the actual application system itself. I'm going to turn things back over to Kyla, actually, so she can talk a bit more about how applications are evaluated and some tips she has for success.
All right, thanks so much, Joanne. Sorry, my slides went back to the start. So we'll have a chance to think here about how your applications will be evaluated in terms of adjudicators and some things that we've learned along the way, some tips for success. So I'll begin with thinking about what makes a really strong application and what you can do to ensure you are submitting a really strong application. We want you to be sure you review the rubric that's in this presentation, and I'll show you in just a minute, but it's also online. Review the rubric so you understand what adjudicators are going to be looking for in your proposal. Okay, so all the criteria that we use to evaluate your application are in that rubric, and that adjudicators use to evaluate applications are in that rubric. So make sure you understand and you're hitting on the points that are in that rubric. Write clearly in complete sentences. So this really should be a formally written academic proposal. So keep it academic, clear, well-written, well-articulated, fully articulated sentences. Consider your audience. So your application will be adjudicated by two different faculty members or two different people from across campus, and they may not be exactly in the area of research that you're proposing. So they'll be closely related to your research area, but they might not know the specifics and the details and the terminology associated with the field that you are conducting research in. So you're going to need to avoid using jargon that someone outside of the discipline might not understand. Keep the research readable so that, you know, someone that's informed in the discipline broadly can understand it, but the specifics of your research project are clearly defined and clearly explained. Making every sentence count, making every word count. So you'll see those character limits in each of the sections. Those are going to make sure you have to be concise and, you know, keep the sentences and the words that you use really to the point and clearly communicating what it is you want to convey about your research. Double, triple check spelling and grammar. So spelling and grammar mistakes can distract a reader from what it is you're trying to convey. So making sure that this is a really well proofread, well written proposal. In terms of the adjudication, how the process works is the applications that come in get categorized as either health-related applications or non-health related applications. And you'll see the health-related applications are eligible for all the awards that are listed there on the left in the yellow circle. The non-health related awards are go into the category of the peer awards. You'll notice there's overlap between those two because some peer awards also are allocated in terms of health related projects. So the distinction here between health and non-health determines where the application gets evaluated and also the awards that you're eligible for. So, you know, regardless of the health versus non-health, we really want to be sure that students from all faculties and all disciplines, research types, different research methodologies, epistemologies, disciplinary perspectives apply to this program, because we do have awards that are in the peer program that are non-health related, that are, you know, focused on social sciences or the arts or the fine arts. All kinds of different disciplines are represented in that red circle there. So really strongly encourage people with diverse disciplinary backgrounds to apply for these awards. So depending on the category in which your award falls, you can see the criteria that your application will be adjudicated based on. So if you are in the non-health and in the peer applications, you could see the criteria there: project description, the points awarded to that versus the originality, creativity, significance, benefits, background, preparation, quality of research experience. So those are the criteria for peer that your application will be evaluated on. If you're in the health category, you'll see that it's all the same categories as the category for peer, but there's an additional component where adjudicators will also be evaluating the mentorship and research environment. So there's additional points associated with that in the adjudication rubric. And so the rubric here takes each of those criteria and describes what a success indicator looks like for those criteria. So this is where we mentioned before that you should really carefully read what the adjudicators are going to be looking for in terms of success in each category. So adjudicators will assign up to a maximum of 10 points for the project description, looking for these different characteristics and these different criteria. So each of these are sort of expanded and more clearly spelled out in terms of what success looks like for a proposal. Be sure that, if it's asking for, it's very clear how this will enhance your learning, that you've really explained that aspect in terms of the benefit that you'll experience, and explaining things as concretely as possible, right? So giving specifics and concrete ways in which you will see benefit, for example. Okay, so use the rubric as much as you can to help you craft your proposal. I often, when I'm doing these kinds of things, write the proposal and then take the rubric and score myself and see what I think I would give myself, and then use that to think, oh, I need a bit more in the project description to really hit on these success indicators. Okay, so you can use the rubric as much as possible. All right, so we've hit on that point already. So we today have focused really on the summer studentships that are in the Consolidated Application System, and we saw the list of summer studentships that includes. There are other summer studentship opportunities outside of the CAS. It's not an exhaustive list of all the summer studentships that are out there. So check with your faculty and department for opportunities. Lots of times there's specific opportunities that happen at the faculty level, at the department level, that you could apply for. NSERC USRA is also another big summer studentship program that operates on campus, but is independent of the CAS. So there's information on that research.ucalgary.ca/students about NSERC there. So you can check out all the terms and conditions of the NSERC USRA and see if you are eligible for that and wanting to apply for NSERC. There's other opportunities. MyTax is another one that comes to mind that some summer students apply for. With that, and thinking about awards internal to the CAS and awards external to the CAS, regardless of where the funding is coming from, you cannot hold more than one research studentship per term, per summer. So some lucky students apply through the CAS and are successful and receive an offer of an award, and they've applied, say, for NSERC, and they receive an offer of an award. If you have two offers for summer studentships, you will need to choose and decide which one you are going to accept. If you've applied through the CAS, you will only receive one offer of a summer studentship through the CAS. So your application will be considered for many awards, but as part of our streamlining of allocation of awards, you will be receiving a single offer out of awards from the CAS system. Okay, so that's a lot of information. We want to have time for questions. We have the session booked until I think 1:15, so we've got lots of time for questions. So Jennifer will be working her way through the chat to bring questions to us, and we're all here and happy to answer the questions that you have about summer studentship.
So Kyla, maybe you can offer a little bit of clarification on what it means for a faculty member to be considered full-time. Does that mean they have to be teaching classes right now?
Ah, I see. Yes. No. So full-time is like a description of our job classification. So it's whether or not we're a full-time member, academic staff. It doesn't refer to teaching loads or any of those kinds of job duty descriptions. It's about whether or not you are hired on as a full-time academic staff. And so probably most helpful for you to look at the list that was provided of what jobs, what do we call full-time academic staff here at UCalgary? Because there's lots of different names. And, ask potential supervisors if they're in this category and could supervise you as a full-time academic staff member on campus.
So there's a question here also regarding, does the same definition about being a U of C academic staff apply to supervisors for NSERC USRAs?
Oh, NSERC, yeah. So I'm not actually affiliated with NSERC. I'm not sure I can answer that question, but we have the link to the NSERC USRA in the slides here, so you could pop on over to that webpage and check it out, read the conditions of the NSERC award and see if that condition still applies.
Yes, and in addition to the website, the whole application site is separate and distinct and run through NSERC. So there is more information there on the application portal for the NSERC user.
Yeah, excellent.
When should students be assigning themselves a deadline for finding a supervisor? You said it's not too late now. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's definitely not too late now, but with a deadline of submission for the students of February 4th, you're going to want to find a supervisor quite quickly here if you haven't already. So it can take some time to find a supervisor. Often students email multiple potential supervisors before they find a supervisor. So that process can take time, and it's really good to start and be working on that quite hard now so that you have time to pull together a really strong proposal. So there's no hard deadline, and we don't have any deadlines from our side about when you should have a supervisor, but that's something you want to get moving on right away here.
So if the student is going on an internship for the fall term rather than taking, academic classes, are they still considered a continuing student?
Yeah, so I believe the advantage of an internship is that you really maintain your status as a full-time student. So if you're on internship, you still have full-time student status, and you would be able to apply for these summer studentships.
So another question about eligibility: if they're convocating but continuing as a grad student in the fall, are they eligible?
So for the majority of awards, no, because you are completing your current degree and you are convocating in June. For the majority of awards, you would not be eligible, but you might be eligible for Alberta Innovates. So I would encourage you to check out Alberta Innovates to see if you're eligible and reach out to them with any questions.
Someone's wondering what the supervisor's portion actually looks like.
Yeah, so, oh, sorry, go ahead, Kyla.
Nope, I was just going to say that, yeah, Joanne had put the link in the slides there for what the supervisor portion looks like, but maybe Joanne, do you want to expand a little bit there?
Yeah, so for the supervisor portion, it is not as intense as the student portion. It's really the student portion that we are assessing. But for the supervisor portion, there is a letter of support, as well as we ask supervisors to submit a piece on their mentorship and research environment that they are providing for the student. As well, for health-related applications, supervisors will be required to upload a PDF listing the last 3 years of operating grants and awards and other information that is available on the application page and also on the peer website. It is linked in the slides, so more information on that can be found through the link in the slides.
And the next question about where to log in and review the application system. I know this question came in before you actually threw that slide up. So that information is there in the presentation. International students, are they eligible to apply? So international students, if you are considered a full-time University of Calgary student, undergraduate student, then yes, you are eligible to apply. To clarify, if you are an exchange students are not considered full-time University of Calgary students, so exchange students are not eligible to apply. And do you know the timing of when students will get sort of the link to the recording for this presentation?
Hopefully by early next week, I will be able to send out the recording.
Okay. Eligibility for previously graduated students. So not students in their last term of studies, but have previously graduated, but not yet begun any other program.
So as in the student has already graduated, like as in?
Like they're not currently a student at the University of Calgary, they're already graduated.
Oh yeah, so unfortunately, I don't know of any awards that are affiliated with the University of Calgary that a current non-University of Calgary student would be able to apply for.
So the question of how many weeks of funding, so is that something that you need to work out with your supervisor prior to applying, or is that something that you just end up receiving funding for a certain number of weeks?
Yeah, so that would be a conversation that you and your supervisor want to decide together, and you then indicate on your application the award length that you would like to apply for. So we don't determine award lengths. We just go straight by what you have told us you would like in terms of your award length. And typically students would be having conversations with their supervisor about commitments that they have in the summer, if they can dedicate a full 16 weeks or if 12 weeks is more appropriate for them, and also the scope of the project. So, is the scope of a project more appropriate for an 8-week term, or does the scope of the project need to have a full 16-week term? Those are the kinds of conversations you want to be having with the supervisor to determine what you will be applying for in terms of summer studentship.
Thank you. So is it possible to have 2 supervisors and list them both as co-supervisors, or do you need to just have 1 supervisor listed?
I can take on this one. So yeah, you can definitely have more than 1 supervisor. However, how the application system works, at least our application system, you can only list 1 supervisor. So that 1 supervisor will be the primary reference and the primary supervisor on your application, and they will be the one who submits the supervisor portion of the application. The primary supervisor who you list in your application can include on their portion of the application that there is a co-supervisor who's there to support and mentor you throughout the research term. So they can include it if you have more than 1 supervisor. And you can certainly be supervised by more than 1 supervisor. It's just how the application system is structured that we only need 1 person listed.
Joanne, can you clarify about uploading transcripts? So is it just the students external to the U of C that need to upload a transcript? And does it need to be official, or can they upload an unofficial transcript?
Yeah, so only non-University of Calgary students, so external to the U of C, need to upload their transcripts. If you are already a University of Calgary student, we are able to connect and access your records to calculate, to check your background. But for non-U of C students, you will need to upload an official transcript from your home institution.
So when students are engaged in their summer research project, just how involved should the supervisor be in the research itself? That's a good question.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting one. So supervisors kind of have differences in terms of how they mentor undergraduates. So supervisors, would potentially mentor students differently in, based on their mentorship style and beliefs. We often encourage supervisors to meet with students at least once a week and kind of get progress and hear updates and support students as they go through. But I know there's lots of variation in how that looks. Some supervisors are much more hands-on, and you might be talking with your supervisor every day through the research process as you're working on stuff. Others, it might be less frequent in terms of check-in. But as a student, that would be something that I'd be really asking of a potential supervisor. So if I didn't have a supervisor, I'd be asking and thinking about what that person might be like as a supervisor and a mentor. What kind of mentorship practices do they have, and how do you think that would fit with what you would need as a student? So lots of times, and we talked about this in the first info session in November, it's about finding that fit too, in terms of, who is going to be a great mentor for you, and what do you hope for and want in terms of a mentorship for your research. So that's a really interesting question, and one that's going to vary from person to person, as every supervisor is different in terms of how they would mentor a student. Lots of supervisors, though, are also very keen and willing to have conversations about how much support you need. So maybe you say, I'd really love to check in every week, or whatever it is, and you can kind of help shape how that process goes as well.
Joanne, do you have any idea what browser Linux users should be using for the application portal?
Unfortunately not. No, I do not know, but I can connect with U Calgary IT to see if they have any suggestions. You can certainly try to still go through the system and submit an application and send an email to us afterwards to just ask, like, does it look okay from your end? That's fine as well.
I'm just going to jump down. So if somebody is using the correct browser and they're still experiencing formatting issues, what should they do?
Yeah, so this is an issue that we experience a lot, which is that sometimes the text will be one continuous line instead of breaking up into the appropriate text box. And this is an issue that we run into every year with this system. The system is quite old, and hopefully next year we will have something that works a little bit better for students. But for this year, please just go ahead, even though it's showing up as one line of text, it's going to look fine on the back end of the system once we prepare the system for adjudication. If you have concerns about that and you're just, I really want to double check and I really want to make sure it looks okay, you can send me an email and I can double check for you.
If somebody wants to review the rubrics, the review rubrics with their supervisor, where can they find them?
So they are in the slide, and I will be sending out the slides along with the recording to everyone who registered for this session. And they are also available on various awards websites. So it's available on the Peer Awards website, and I believe it's probably on the other awards websites as well, like Alberta Innovates and OCSS.
Do references make an application stronger?
So in terms of references, we don't have space in the application form for references, with the exception of the supervisor portion of the application, where the supervisor supports your application and submits a letter of support and provides information about the mentorship and research environment. But in terms of a conventional reference letter that you would typically see in terms of submitting like a grant or an award, we don't accept like PDFs or Word documents of reference letters.
So if two students have the same supervisor, can they both apply with the same project?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the answer is yes. Students can definitely apply with the same supervisor and working on a similar research project. But we really want to be clear with students that each research project should be individual, and you should be ensuring that when you are writing up your research proposal in the application system, that you aren't copying and pasting from each other's answers, that you are writing from your own words and that you are writing from your own perspective on how you envision this research project going. We have had students plagiarizing from other students because they are working on the same research project in the past. And that is not okay, just like it would not be okay for an academic paper. Anything to add there, Kyla?
Yeah, I might just add that oftentimes we think of, there's the big project and, the supervisor might describe, here's the big project that we're working on. But for these, there should be individual pieces of that big project that are unique to the student that is applying. So each student should have a uniquely carved out piece of that bigger project that they can write up and submit for their proposal. So, it's not even that we want it written in your own words describing the exact same project. It needs to be parts of the project are what you will be doing as an individual researcher. And it can be contributing to the bigger whole, but there should be a unique piece that is personal to you as an individual applying for a summer studentship.
So do students have the freedom to choose unique start and end dates? Because we have a question from a non-U Calgary student whose spring term ends after May 1st and then their fall term begins before mid-August. So how would a student like that choose the number of weeks and sort of control when they start and finish?
Yeah, so as long as the research term is between May 1st to August 26th. So for example, say you want to pursue an 8-week research term from July to August, that's totally okay. You don't need to start May 1st. We do allow flexibility in terms of start dates as long as it is within the May 1st to August 26th timeline. I might also add on to that though, because this is a question that we receive often, is that you can't break up your research term. So for example, if you're on an 8-week research term and you want to do 4 weeks in May and 4 weeks in July, unfortunately, you can't do that. It needs to be a continuous research term.
Thank you. So a University of Calgary student looking to work with a non-U Calgary supervisor, are there still studentship opportunities for them?
Not that I'm aware of. Kyla, do you know of any?
No, and in that case, you might want to look to find a co-supervisor that is a U Calgary academic staff member that is willing to collaborate with you and your external partner. And then that U Calgary academic staff member would be listed as the primary reference, with the knowledge that there's a co-supervisory relationship going on there, but it is intended to support research for U Calgary students and faculty.
Yeah, and if I could just add, if you're attending University of Calgary, but you're from someplace else in Canada, and you are going home for the summer and want to engage in research at a university there with a supervisor there, it would probably be a similar situation for non-U of C students coming home to Calgary to do it. So you may inquire of the potential supervisor at that other university, are there funding opportunities there for a student not attending university there? A student mentions a program I'm not familiar with, wondering if it's included in the Consolidated Application Portal, SSE-URP. So I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, I don't know that program either. So it's not in the CAS. Yeah, oh, sorry, can't provide any more.
A student is wondering about research that's happening within the peer program. Does it result in any kind of course credit?
No, the peer program does not give course credit. You receive a stipend instead. So there's no course credit associated with peer. Yeah, it's a co-curricular, non-curricular program.
Yeah, and I mean, for any research project, you cannot receive course credit or set it up as an independent study course if you are receiving a stipend for it. So it's either for a stipend or for course credit if it's eligible and you are in a program that does independent study courses. Yeah. Can the student's research be similar to the research the supervisor is doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So absolutely. Likely you're going to want to find a supervisor whose research interests are very well aligned with you. So that's sort of what we would tend to see, is that you find a project, you know, if you have a research idea, you find a supervisor that shares those common research interests to work with. And sometimes it happens the other way, where a supervisor has a research program and they've got this project that they're really looking for a student to work on, and it fits under the umbrella of their research portfolio. And that's a great opportunity for a student to pick up a project that's associated with a researcher's portfolio, what they do in their research.
Here's a question. Is there any advantage to a student delaying convocation, even though they already meet graduation requirements in order to apply for studentship funding?
Yeah, so in that case, it's not really even about delaying convocation. You have to be returning and taking courses as part of your program. So whether or not you sort of decide to graduate, you know, you don't graduate in June, you graduate in the fall, but you're not even taking courses in the fall. That's not really what the intention of the term there is. The intention is that you are returning as a student to conduct courses or to be involved in courses.
And I would also note that the deadline to apply to graduate happens long before any funding decisions have been made. And the sad reality is that not every student that applies for funding will receive funding. So there's a chance you may have committed yourself to taking additional coursework when you don't need to for a summer studentship funding award that may not happen. We don't know the volume of applications in the system yet because the deadline has not passed, but quite often it is the case there are more students applying for funding than there are funding awards to give out. Isn't that correct, Kyla?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you put any sample answers, so students beyond the rubric can sort of see what a good answer looks like?
No, unfortunately, we don't have any sample answers, and mostly it's because the research looks so different for every application. There's just so much variation in what the research looks like, and what looks strong in terms of a proposal, that it's not extra useful to see samples in that way. So there's no sort of guides or exemplary work to work from. You've got to kind of make it your own and describe your own research as best you can. Yeah.
What are options for students that do not receive funding but still want to be able to participate in research with the supervisor? I know one plan B is if you're in a program that has the ability to set up independent study courses, that is an option. Turn it into a course experience rather than a funded experience. I should also say that it's not to engage in a research environment without pay can be problematic. I'll let Kyla elaborate on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes a supervisor will have research funds that they can fund your project through their research funds. But if that's not the case, and you don't want to turn it into a 4-credit course, an independent studies course, some students have elected to volunteer their time to do research. We're all super aware that that's not an option for all students. And so looking for other ways that you can conduct their research and still get credit or get pay would be our hope for you. Yeah.
And I mean, if there's any students still here in the session that are from the Bachelor of Health Sciences program and they want to look at other Plan B options, they can reach out to me and we can talk about deadlines for changing a studentship into an independent study course. Peer awards always 6 weeks.
No, they're 8, 12, or 16 weeks. So you can choose 8, 12, or 16-week term.
So Carla, can you elaborate a little bit on the application portion where it asks to describe any relevant past experience? Like what would students that don't have any previous research experience potentially include in that section?
Yeah, great question. So this is important for students to think broadly about experience and what you bring to a research opportunity. So thinking about course experience, thinking about, if you're in a lab-based work, any lab courses that you have that might contribute to your research skills, extracurricular activities that have helped you to develop skills that could make you a really strong researcher, work experience. All of these things can be relevant and can be part of that experience portion of the application. So think broadly. Don't think that you have to have research experience before you even apply for these opportunities. Many of the students who are successful in receiving our Summer Studentship Awards are coming out of their first year. So lots of students, this is their first research opportunity and they've still been successful in the application process. And those students are able to think about and articulate what skills they're bringing to the research, even if they don't have research experience.
Okay, thank you. Student is asking more clarification about a previously graduated student. For any of the students with questions in the chat, if we have not addressed your question like you needed it to be addressed, please email the email address that's on the screen right now, summerstudent@ucalgary.ca. That would be also where you would email to make sure your application, if you're having formatting issues, looks okay on the back end. So that's the place to head for support and questions. Eligibility for non-U Calgary students. So if they are currently a full-time student at a university in another country, would they be eligible?
For many of the awards, no, you need to be a full-time U Calgary student. Yeah, Jennifer, any other?
Well, there are, you know, if you meet all the other criteria, potentially Alberta Innovates does sort of offer some funding awards to non-U Calgary students as long as you meet the other criteria there. You can go to the university website, research.ucalgary/research, I think it was. It's in the presentation at the beginning.
Yeah.
And you can check out the individual awards and the terms to see if you're eligible. Really good question. Does the university foresee a small chance that we could lose our research opportunities due to the pandemic? Backup plan, since you can only accept one research opportunity. So we've already been through this experience more than once. So Kyla, we can talk about what happens if.
Yeah, great. Yeah, we have had now 2 iterations of summer studentships that have continued through the pandemic. And so we were able to continue to support financially through these summer studentship students, regardless of the pandemic. And we would do so again this year. So we definitely wouldn't pull funding if, you know, research needs to happen remotely or whatnot. At this stage, it might not be bad to have a backup plan in your mind of what the research could look like if you did need to be remote. That was sort of how things have gone for the last couple of years. Students that had planned, you know, in-person research that wasn't going to be possible due to the pandemic created an alternative plan where they could do the research remotely. So not a bad idea to have that in the back of your mind, although I'm very hopeful that this summer that won't need to be the case, but it won't alter whether or not we offer funding. We're continuing with the program regardless. We think it's really important to keep research happening and to keep supporting students with these summer studentships.
And I know right now at this point in time, there are independent study courses that are happening in person. There are honors thesis research projects happening in person. So it could look like anything. Yeah. Somebody's wondering if it's possible to get feedback on the application before submitting. And I think that feedback needs to come from your supervisor.
Yeah.
Would you concur, Kyla?
Absolutely. So we're anticipating likely over 700 applications to our system, and we just don't have capacity to provide feedback. Plus, you know, we're going to see research from all over campus. We just don't even have individually the expertise to provide feedback on research in engineering or fine arts or all the different areas that people could be coming from. So I'd say use your supervisor, have conversations going back and forth about the content of your proposal with your supervisor.
Yeah, and that ties into the next question about having a supervisor look over their proposal. Yes, absolutely. Work on things collaboratively with your supervisor. They are your best resource in the student portion of the application. And yeah, somebody's comment is, anybody has any course lab experience in the past 2 years? Yeah, it's not. I feel you. I feel you. The comment resonates very strongly. Yes, it has been an unusual 2 years, but more and more is being able to happen in person. I think we've made it through most of the questions. Hopefully we didn't miss anything. You've got a couple more minutes if anybody has anything they want to shoot into the chat. But this is very exciting. I have the privilege of working in a research intensive program, and as a program coordinator and an academic advisor, it's just amazing to see what happens over the course of these summer studentship experience. It's exciting. References are not necessary for our portion. I don't know if you're talking about reference letter type things, or you're talking about references to what you're writing. Kyla, do you want to sort of?
Yeah, I wondered the same when I saw that before, if this is, you know, citations of the literature or references in terms of your personal care. Oh, I see citations. Thanks for clarifying. So citations can be in there if you need to. You probably want to find a shortened way to do the citation. is to keep your character count down. So I know, when you think about an abstract, often those provide the research context without citations. That sort of high level overview of the research can help. But if there are places where you really want to include citations, find a concise way to do it. Because I know, sometimes our academic citation lists are 3 pages long alone, and there's just not space for that in the application. So fit it in where you can. I'd say use the shorthand version of your citations to get it in there.
No, peer awards are not always 16 weeks. You indicate the length of funding you're applying to, whether that's 8, 12, or 16 weeks. And Joanne did indicate that she's going to try to get the recording out to all seminar registrants early next week. So it's a great chance to review, and even share the recording with your friends that forgot to register. Share the information broadly.
Yes, that would be wonderful. Well, thank you everybody for your time and for joining us. If more questions come up in the next few weeks, feel free to email summerstudent@ucalgary.ca and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. All the best with your courses and with your application.